"Don't you dare touch my daughter again! Get out, now!" The voice cut through the warm hum of maple and steam Café like a sharp blade. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The hiss of the espresso machine faded into a thin, uneasy silence. Nia Carter froze, her knees bent as she balanced on the balls of her feet, hands mid-motion in the fluid shapes of American Sign Language. She had been signing something simple, "Good morning," to the little girl at the corner table. Lily Pierce's eyes had lit up at the sight, her lips curving into the faintest shy smile. It was a smile that seemed like it had been waiting years to appear. And then her father arrived. Logan Pierce, tech magnate, and a man whose photo appeared in business magazines more often than in family albums, stood in the doorway like a storm cloud blocking the afternoon sun. The light behind him cast a long shadow across the polished tile, reaching right to where Nia knelt. His dark suit looked untouched by the city's grit, his tie perfectly straight, as though nothing in his life dared be out of place. His gaze, however, was anything but composed. "I said," his voice was steady, but the edge in it could slice glass, "get away from her." Nia straightened slowly, the quiet in the room pressing in on her. She wasn't touching Lily, she hadn't even been close enough to. But the truth didn't seem to matter, not when his eyes already told her she'd decided who she was and what she wanted. "I was just," she began. "Just what?" Logan's tone didn't rise, but it grew colder. "Earning sympathy? Looking for an angle? I've seen this before." The words stung, not because they were true, they weren't, but because of the way people at nearby tables shifted, leaning just enough to catch the exchange. She could feel their eyes tracing her every move, their assumptions wrapping around her like heavy chains. Lily glanced between them, confusion written across her delicate features. She lifted her hands and signed something small, quick, but Logan's attention was locked on Nia. "Darren," he called toward the counter. The cafe owner looked up from behind the espresso machine. "She's finished here, today." The request wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of command. Darren hesitated, just for a moment, before stepping toward them. Nia's pulse thudded in her ears. She could argue, she could insist on explaining, but she knew that in this room, in this moment, her voice would sound like noise against his certainty. So instead, she untied her apron, folded it neatly, and set it on the counter without a word. Outside, late afternoon lights spilled onto the sidewalk, catching in the curls of steam rising from paper cups. Nia stepped into it, her chest tight, the sound of the cafe door closing behind her like the final note of a song cut short. She didn't notice at first, the small figure slipping out from the corner booth, following her toward the window. Lily's palm pressed to the glass as Nia walked away. And for a fraction of a second, their eyes met, hers wide with something that felt like a plea. It was the kind of look that stayed with you. And it was only the beginning. Nia didn't make it far from Maple and Steam. Her hands were still trembling, though the late autumn chill had little to do with it. She stopped at the corner, leaning against a lamppost while the city moved around her. Car horns, the distant wail of an ambulance, the smell of roasted chestnuts from a street cart nearby. The scene in the cafe replayed in her mind, every word sharpened by the echo of onlookers' stares. She wasn't new to judgment. It came in many forms, and most of them wore polite faces. But there was something about the way Logan Pierce had looked at her, as if she'd been a problem long before he ever knew her name. A soft rap on the glass behind her drew her attention back toward the cafe. Lily was still there, her palm pressed flat, her small frame almost swallowed by the oversized booth. She lifted her other hand and traced a single shape in the air, a sign so quick and subtle most people would miss it. "Thank you." It caught Nia off guard. Her throat tightened, but she forced a smile before turning away. She didn't know why it mattered so much that this child had noticed her, but it did. Over the next few days, the city rolled on like it always did. For Nia, that meant double shifts at a neighborhood diner, studying for her certification in early childhood education at night, and visiting her Aunt May on weekends.
Her aunt, who had been born deaf, was the reason Nia had learned American Sign Language in the first place. It wasn't just a skill, it was a bridge. She'd never thought that bridge would connect her to a stranger's child in a high-end cafe, and yet, every time she passed Maple and Steam on her way to work, she caught herself glancing inside. Once, she spotted Lily seated near the window, chin propped on her hands, eyes scanning the street as if expecting someone. But the next time Nia saw her, the air felt different. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and the light through the cafe windows was dim, the clouds outside heavy with the threat of rain. Nia had ducked inside to grab coffee for a coworker, careful to avoid lingering. She had almost reached the counter when she heard it, a low murmur from a nearby table. "That's the girl," a woman's voice whispered, "the one from last week." A man replied, not quite loud enough, "You never know what people are after, especially around someone like Pierce." Nia kept her gaze forward, but every syllable seemed to sink into her skin. She didn't confront them. She'd learned long ago that some battles only fed the fire for those who'd already decided the ending. Still, the injustice pressed against her chest like a stone. Later that week, fate, or something like it, pushed their paths together again. Nia had just stepped out of the diner after closing when she spotted a familiar silhouette across the street. Lily, in a pale yellow coat, stood at the edge of the sidewalk, eyes locked on a chalk drawing she was making on the pavement. It might have been fine, if not for the blur of motion coming around the corner. A delivery van, brakes squealing on the wet asphalt. Nia didn't think, she ran.
The world narrowed to the sound of her footsteps and the pounding in her ears. She reached Lily just in time, scooping her into her arms and twisting them both toward the curb. The van missed by inches, the rush of air whipping against Nia's cheek. When she opened her eyes, Lily's arms were around her neck, her small hands gripping tight. The girl leaned back just enough to sign one word. From the other side of the street came the sound of footsteps pounding closer. Logan Pierce's face was pale, his breath ragged. His eyes moved over Lily, checking for injuries, then lifted to Nia. For a moment, the sharpness was gone, replaced by something uncertain. It was the first crack in the wall between them. And it was that moment, fleeting but undeniable, that would lead Nia into a world she'd never stepped into before, where kindness and mistrust would walk side by side, and where the true test of who she was had only just begun. If Logan's gratitude for that day on the street existed, it stayed buried under layers of reserve. 2 days later, he appeared at the diner where Nia worked, his presence drawing curious glances from regular customers. He didn't order food. Instead, he asked to speak with her privately, away from the clatter of plates and the hiss of the grill. "I want you to work with Lily," he said, straight to the point. "She's been different since she met you. Better, more engaged." Nia hesitated, unsure if this was a genuine offer or another test. "And if I say yes?" "You'd have full authority over her lessons," Logan replied, "and my protection." The word protection sat strangely on her tongue, but she accepted. Not for him, but for the child whose small hands had signed safe into hers. From the moment she set foot inside the Pierce estate, the air felt heavier. The house was breathtaking, all glass and marble, with sunlight spilling across polished floors, but beauty here had sharp edges. The first to greet her wasn't Logan, but Elaine, the chief of household staff. Her smile was polite, but her eyes lingered in a way that said more than words could. "I'll show you the main entrance," she said, as though it were a privilege she wasn't sure Nia deserved. In the study, Lily waited with her sketchbook, her face brightening the moment Nia signed "Good morning." The lesson began simply, colors, animals, short phrases, but the room's calm was fragile. Twice, footsteps paused at the doorway, and voices carried just far enough for Nia to hear her name paired with quiet, clipped remarks. It wasn't just whispers. At lunch, while Lily fetched more paper from the study, Logan stepped away to speak with a visitor. Derek Vaughn, an old friend whose handshake was firm, but whose eyes were calculating. "So, you're the new tutor," he said, his tone friendly enough to pass for casual conversation. "Interesting choice for someone in your position, Logan." Nia kept her voice even. Sometimes the right choice doesn't look like the obvious one. Derek's smile tilted. "We'll see how long you last." Later in the garden, she caught sight of him again, watching from a distance with the faintest smirk. It wasn't curiosity, it was measurement, like a chess player studying an unfamiliar piece. By the end of her first week, the pressure had grown. Elaine's glances, Derek's insinuations, the murmurs among the staff, each one small enough to ignore on its own, but together they built a steady weight on her shoulders. And yet, Nia refused to bend. Every morning she walked through the front door, met Lily's expectant smile, and signed, "Ready?" as though nothing could shake her. If they were waiting for her to retreat, they would be waiting a long time. Because she knew, deep down, the real test hadn't even started. By the end of that first week, the pattern had settled. Morning lessons, lunch under Elaine's watchful eye, and afternoons in the garden, where Lily seemed to breathe more freely. But beneath the routine, the quiet resistance in the house was constant, like a draft you couldn't quite find the source of. Nia felt it in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, or how Derek always seemed to be passing by at the precise moment she and Lily were laughing. She didn't need anyone to tell her she was being tested. She could feel it. Still, she came back each day. And then, on a gray Thursday afternoon, the test changed. They'd just finished practicing the alphabet when Lily asked to go outside. The sky was heavy with clouds, the air sharp with the scent of rain. Lily crouched near the front steps, chalk in hand, sketching a crooked sun on the pavement. It happened in seconds. The delivery van rounded the corner too fast, tires squealing on the slick road. Lily stepped back to admire her drawing, right into the path of the oncoming vehicle. Nia dropped the chalk she'd been holding, her body moving before her mind had time to form a thought. She sprinted forward, scooping Lily into her arms and twisting them both toward the safety of the steps. The van roared past, the driver's shout fading into the distance. For a moment, all Nia could hear was Lily's breath against her shoulder. The little girl pulled back just enough to sign a single word: safe. Nia's throat tightened. She signed it back, her fingers steady even though her heart was still racing. That was the moment Logan appeared at the door. His expression wasn't the icy mask she'd come to expect. It was something raw, unguarded. He stepped forward, checking Lily over with quick hands before looking up at Nia. He started, but stopped himself. The silence between them was different now, not the strained quiet of suspicion, but the kind that follows a truth too big to ignore. An hour later, as rain streaked the windows of the study, Logan returned. Lily was curled up in an armchair, sketchbook balanced on her knees. He said quietly, "about a lot of things." Nia kept her eyes on the book she was holding. "That doesn't erase what you said." "No," he admitted, "but maybe I can make it right. I want you here, not just for the lessons. She needs you." Nia looked at Lily, who was pretending not to listen, but whose hand had stilled over the page. "Then you let me do this my way. No interference, no games." Logan nodded once. Agreed. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was the first time she'd set the terms. That small shift would matter more than she knew, because in the days ahead, the battles wouldn't just be about teaching a child to speak with her hands. They would be about who was truly in control, and Nia had just taken her first piece off the board. The days after the near miss with the delivery van were calmer on the surface, but Nia could feel the undercurrents shifting. Logan kept his distance, but no longer carried that silent verdict in his eyes. Lily, on the other hand, seemed to bloom, signing faster, smiling more, even daring to tease Nia when she pretended to get a word wrong. It was almost easy to forget that not everyone wanted her there. The reminder came in the form of an invitation.
Charity gala, Logan explained one morning, sliding an embossed envelope across the study table. Black tie, benefiting children's literacy programs. I'd like you to come, with Lily. Nia hesitated. You want me at your table? I want people to see what you've done for her, he said simply. Part of her wanted to decline, to avoid the stares, the whispers, but Lily's hopeful glance decided it for her. The ballroom was a sea of soft gold light and low music, the air carrying the mingled scents of roses and expensive perfume. Crystal chandeliers spilled brightness over tables draped in white linen. Nia arrived in a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, Lily's small hand curled in hers. For the first hour, things went smoothly. They listened to speeches, clinked glasses of sparkling cider, and Lily signed a polite thank you to each person who greeted her. Then, during the main course, a familiar voice carried across the table. Derek Vaughn. He was smiling, but his words had an edge sharp enough to catch. So, Nia, quite the leap from café work to dining under chandeliers. How did you manage it? Nia set down her fork. I followed the work I care about. That work led me here. Laughter, quiet but pointed, rippled from 2 seats down. Derek leaned in slightly, as if confiding. You know, the press loves a story like that. A wealthy man, a newcomer in his home. They can spin it any way they want. Logan started to speak, but Nia raised a hand gently. They can spin whatever they want, she said, her voice steady, but I'm not here for them. I'm here for her. She nodded toward Lily, who was watching every word. A few guests glanced away, their smiles faltering. Derek's, however, stayed fixed until the next moment. The lights dimmed slightly as the evening's special presentation began. Nia had been waiting for this. She reached for her clutch, slipping out a small flash drive and passing it to a man in a dark suit near the stage, an investigator she'd met quietly a week earlier. Within minutes, the large screen behind the podium flickered to life. It wasn't the planned slideshow of donor names. It was grainy security footage. Derek Vaughn, in a dim warehouse, overseeing the loading of unmarked crates into a truck. The date stamp was just 3 months old. The room went silent except for the narrator's voice, the investigator, explaining the connection between those shipments and an ongoing federal probe. Derek shot to his feet. This is outrageous! But before he could finish, 2 plainclothes agents stepped forward from the back of the room. Mr. Vaughn, you need to come with us. The sound of murmurs swelled, a wave rolling across the glittering room. Cameras from the press, there to cover the charity event, pivoted instantly. Derek's protests faded as he was escorted out.
Nia didn't stand. She didn't need to. Instead, she placed her hand over Lily's and signed safe, the word they'd shared since the first day. Lily's answering smile was small but sure. Across the table, Logan met her gaze. You just turned the story on its head, he said quietly. Nia shook her head. No, the story isn't about him. It's about what she deserves, a life without people like that around her. And in that moment, surrounded by whispers and flashbulbs, Nia knew the balance in this house, and in her fight, had shifted for good. The news hit before the night was even over. By the time Nia and Lily returned to the Pierce estate, headlines were already circulating online. Prominent businessmen arrested at charity gala. Photos from the event, Derek's face tight with shock, agents leading him through the crowd, were everywhere. Some articles even mentioned the woman who'd remained calm beside the child in the navy dress. Nia ignored those. She sat with Lily in the quiet of the sunroom, the hum of the city beyond the tall glass windows. The girl was tired, but she kept glancing at Nia, as if needing reassurance that what had happened tonight hadn't made the world less safe. Nia reached over, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. It's over, she said softly, at least this part. The next morning, the house felt different. Not lighter exactly, but steadier, as though one of its quiet threats had been removed. Elaine greeted Nia at the door without her usual measured pause, and the staff's conversations didn't fall silent when she entered the kitchen for tea.
Logan called her into his study after Lily's lesson. He was standing by the window, the late morning light casting long stripes across the floor. "I owe you more than I can say," he began. "Not just for last night, for every day you've been here. You've given Lily something I couldn't." Nia shook her head. "You gave her a chance to trust again. I just spoke her language." He smiled faintly, but there was seriousness in his eyes. "I want you to stay, not just as her tutor, as part of something bigger." 2 weeks later, that something bigger took form. With Logan's backing, Nia launched Hands Forward, a community program dedicated to teaching sign language to children and families, especially in neighborhoods where resources were scarce. The opening was small, a single bright room in a community center, but it was filled with color, laughter, and a sense of possibility. Lily was there, of course, seated at a table with a group of children her age, showing them how to sign friend. Her hands moved with confidence, her smile unguarded. Reporters came, snapping photos of the ribbon cutting, but Nia barely noticed them. Her focus stayed on the children, on the sound of their laughter, and on the quiet pride in knowing this space wouldn't just change one life, it could change many. That night, as she locked up the center, she found Lily's latest drawing tucked into her bag. 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, stood in front of a group of children, the word SAFE written in bold letters above them. Nia smiled, tracing the lines with her fingertip. She didn't need the spotlight or the headlines. This was the proof that the fight had been worth it. And though the road ahead would hold new challenges, she knew now that she wasn't just surviving in someone else's world, she was building her own. The first anniversary of Hands Forward came on a bright spring afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the new center, a bigger space now, with walls painted in warm colors and shelves lined with books and games. The hum of conversation mixed with bursts of laughter as children moved between tables, their hands shaping words in the air. In the middle of the room, Lily stood on a small stage, wearing a pale blue dress and a grin that could light up the space without the overhead bulbs. She looked out at the audience, parents, teachers, community leaders, and signed slowly, clearly, SAFE, together. The crowd responded in kind, a ripple of hands moving through the air like a silent cheer. Nia stood off to the side, watching, her chest tight in the best way. After the speeches, Lily tugged at her sleeve and handed her a small object wrapped in tissue paper. When Nia unwrapped it, she found a piece of bright yellow chalk, the same color Lily had used the day they first met outside the cafe. On its side, in careful block letters, was one word: SAFE. Nia closed her hand around it. The chalk was just a scrap, fragile and easily broken, yet it carried the entire journey. The mistrust, the risks, the nights wondering if she should walk away, and the choice, again and again, to stay. She glanced around the room, at the faces lit with hope, at the children whose hands moved confidently in a language some had only just begun to learn. This, she thought, is what worth looks like. Not in money, not in titles, but in the moments when someone finally knows they belong. Outside, the afternoon light poured across the sidewalk, catching in the dust rising from the chalk drawings some of the children had made earlier. Nia slipped the small piece of yellow into her pocket, knowing she would carry it and everything it meant with her wherever she went. Because the story wasn't just about her or Lily anymore. It was about every hand that had learned to speak, every heart that had learned to listen, and the quiet, unshakable truth that dignity is never given. It's claimed, one choice at a time. Life has a way of testing us, often in the moments we least expect. Nia's journey reminds us that dignity isn't granted by status or wealth. It's upheld by our choices, especially when those choices require courage. Prejudice in any form is like a wall built brick by brick over time. Sometimes it takes just one act of quiet defiance, one voice refusing to be silenced, to start breaking it down.
We all encounter situations where we are underestimated, misunderstood, or even pushed aside. In those moments, it's easy to let bitterness take root or to simply walk away. But as the saying goes, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. True strength is forged when we stand our ground with integrity, even when the current is against us.
Nia didn't just defend herself, she chose to protect someone more vulnerable, and in doing so, she found a deeper purpose. That's the lesson worth carrying forward. When you protect others, you also protect the best parts of yourself. Standing up against injustice, breaking free from toxic narratives, and choosing to see beyond appearances can create ripples far greater than we imagine. So ask yourself, where in your life can you be that steady hand for someone else? Where can you turn suspicion into understanding or judgment into compassion? If this story spoke to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your own experiences or reflections in the comments. Let us know what resonated most, and if you have faced moments where you had to stand up for what's right. Don't forget to like this video to support the channel, and subscribe so you won't miss the next powerful, thought-provoking story. May you carry peace and hope with you, even in the midst of life's storms, because the calm after the chaos is always worth waiting for.